once we get this cleaned up, it's going to be quite subtle and have a lot more depth than it did when it was just raw plastic. Hello, this is BJ from Hearns Hobbies, and thanks for joining me for another session of the Tamiya 148 scale Phantom F-4B build. So this is where we're at. Okay, this is where we left off. As you can see, it's pretty much together now. Got all the undercarriage done. Now, in the last session, I did do a repair job on one of these undercarriage legs here. That's this one here. Now, from the overhead, you probably see it better. Now, this one here was broken off because I actually put it back in the box and it got crushed with other things on top. So, if you want to see how I repair things by pinning them and gluing them, then go to the last episode. And at the moment, you can see it's strong, but it's only been pretty much tacked in there so it doesn't move. Whole idea behind that is when I put on the wheel, if I find that the wheel is a little bit off, I'll be able to recenter this. Okay, so you can see there's still a bit of movement there. And once I'm happy with that actual position, I will be filling this in with some CA glue or super glue, and then probably filling in the little seam there for extra strength with some sprue goo. All right, but for the time being, that's got enough strength, it sits by itself without any troubles here, like so. All right, now we're pretty much on the home straight now. This is pretty much all the bits that we have left, and a couple of little bits still on a few sprues over here. Now we have the cockpit components, we've got the seats, which I've already washed and cleaned a little bit. I'll probably clean them a little bit more because they're still a little bit darker than I would like. Same with inside the cockpit, so we'll do that sort of finessing a bit later. Here I have the canopy components. They're all little individual parts. You've got the front windscreen, the pilot's cover and the co-pilot's cover. The wheels are just over here. Got the drop tank here. We left a few things sort of loose. So the nose cone here is still loose as well. Okay, you can see it just pops off. But it's such a good fit that I've just left it in there for the moment, all dry. And that way, once I glue on all the other components, such as the shield for the instrument panel, we'll be able to readjust it if we need to. Over here, we've got the leftover clear parts. So these are the parts that I intentionally didn't put in when the instructions said so, because we're going to be using a different glue. It's the same glue we've used for bonding most of these parts to the clear. And that's like the glue and glaze or even the microscale crystal clear. It's a very pure white glue being a wood glue, I guess. Advantage of this stuff is when it dries, it is perfectly clear and very difficult to see. Other advantage is it's not going to mark the plastic because it doesn't actually weld into the plastic. So if you do make any mistakes, you can peel it off. The other great thing about this stuff is some people have been using super glue or CA for their canopies, and the CA can fog canopies, so it totally avoids that as well. Okay, so I thoroughly recommend any sort of canopy type glue for doing clear parts. Okay, so hence why I've got this sheet here. So these are going to be covers, there's head-up display there as well, and various light lens covers. I'll put those on after I complete all the wash. So I'm going to start off with doing a lot of the wash across this, simply because I'm using an oil wash. This is the Tamiya Accent panel wash. It does take some time to dry. So as we cover it, we'll let it dry, and then I'll start working on this stuff again. I'll probably do a wash on this too. And then once it's dry, we'll be able to start rubbing it back for the rest of the session. Okay, let's get started. Let me work on this one first, I think. All right, so I've just got my wash here. Now the way I'm applying this wash and rubbing it back, you can only do that really easily with these oil type or enamel based washes. A water-based wash will also work in highlighting all these details, but you have to manipulate it while it's still wet. Okay, some of them you can adjust with alcohol, such as IPA or isopropyl. But I just find this is a very, very simple and always gives you a very good result. All right, so I'm applying it quite liberally. That's quite intentional too. And make sure that all the deep-seated detail gets a very good coating of wash. Basically, the heavier wash, the more pigment which is going to remain in that point, and the more contrast you're going to get. Okay. Alright, so that bit's done there. Might as well do the wheels as well since they're sitting here. Give them plenty of time to dry. The other great thing about this particular wash too is the brush that's included. It's the same type of brush that you see in the extra thin glue. Nice and fine. You might be able to see how fine the tip is on that. Works in probably 90% of cases. So I'll pop that over here to dry. Okay, so at the stage we're up to now, there's not much left. So really, once the canopy goes together, there is the mounting ladder. I guess that's where the crew gets on into the cockpit, and then also the refueling probe. So I intentionally chose to have those deployed, just to show off the options that you can have with this kit. It's pretty little chance that you'll see a refueling probe open while it's on the ground, but it's interesting to see nevertheless. Okay. Alright, so we're on our wheels. Let's see, let's do some of these parts here for the canopy. It's always good to do this in this aspect first, because we're going to be gluing these together just to show off the design of this kit. Okay, that part there. There's a shield. Right, so the head-up display is going to go on this as well. Okay, so it's just going to be at this point right there. And just by adding the wash, by the time we put on the head-up display, I'll probably do a little bit of wash on the head-up display as well, just to accent that. Just have to be careful sometimes with this brush because it can load up very quickly, and just here it's probably applied more than I would like. I'm just trying to remove as much as I can now. It's not a big problem, but just means that cleaning up later is going to be a bit more of a chore, and some of these panel lines are probably going to be deeper than I would like them to be. Right, we've got that bit. I'm just going to do the inside of this frame on the center of the canopy. This is the join between the co-pilot and the pilot. If some of the wash gets onto the clear parts, it doesn't really matter because you can clean it up if you like. It's not going to affect it at all. Of course, you try to be careful and not get it onto the clear parts, because if you don't need to to clean it up, then it's better just to leave it alone. Alright, so there's one part there. We'll just do the seals on the canopy sides as well. And we'll just do the front part of this one. All right, pretty happy with what has happened with those parts. Now I'm going to start working on this. So I've already done a little bit on the bottom, so how about we, whoop, oh, that's a bit of demonstration how strong that undercarriage is. It's just bounced off the table there. So that's why it's important to put metal pins in any repair, because butt joint plastic, although it's welded together, still won't have the same strength as anything that's been pinned with a harder material. So, all right, let's concentrate around about the cockpit here. So I'm just doing the air intakes. Now sometimes you'll have areas such as inside of these intakes, there's a gap between themselves and the fuselage. This brush isn't going to go in, so I do have another brush where we can access all those parts again. Okay, some of these panel lines are quite fine, so I think I'll put on my visors here just to see where I'm going. That's one of the great things about this particular kit too, is how fine these panel lines are. So it's a very reminiscent of classic Hasegawa kits. Also have very fine rivet detail. And without this wash, it's very difficult to pick up on all this. Okay, so I'm just trying to paint along the lines of all these rivets. It can be a little bit rough at times. As I've said before, it doesn't matter because we're going to be cleaning all this up anyway. We're going to be rubbing it back with a cotton wool bud, with thinner, so just a little bit of enamel thinner, and these will all be cleaned away across the surface, leaving only the very fine indented details. As you do this, you will notice that because of the very low surface tension, which is particularly a case with enamel based washes, you'll see the wash just flow quite naturally along deep panel lines. I find it quite therapeutic actually, just watching them just travel around. Now, water-based washes, particularly if you make them yourself, naturally water has quite a high tension to it. So you do need to mix in a tension reducer, so such as a Vallejo flow improver. Well, I think I've shown on different videos on how to make your own washes. You can just use dishwashing detergent as well. The downside of using dishwashing detergent is it does have a sudsing quality to it, which isn't always desirable. If you get yourself some tension remover, you can either get it from art stores, because it is quite often used in the art discipline, or just a Vallejo flow improver. It'll make your life much easier. That's with water-based washes, that is. It's quite magical seeing this as I drop this into one of these intersecting lines. Maybe I just see that flow just by itself. Okay, so for all the rivets, we'll have to paint across the surface to pick them up. Now, any kit that has very fine surface details benefits from the use of thin cements, because thin cements, they dry fairly quickly, so they don't really have time to attack any surface detail when you're gluing things together. The thing to watch out though is it is very reliant on how perfect the fit is with the plastic parts. So it's all got to do with the surface area of that. And if they don't join too well, you're not going to get a very good join with thin cement. So you may have to reinforce that, or even use sprue glue. So if you need to know what sprue glue is and how it's used, you'll be able to find a tutorial on that shortly. So you just have to type in sprue glue, S-P-R-U-E, and then glue is just G-O-O. And I'll discuss how you make it and how to use it. Okay, so let's just have a close look here. Alright, it's looking alright. Right, so I'm just painting across here to pick up all the rivets. Now if you were painting this, this would be beneficial if you wanted to show off all these rivets, to paint this in a very smooth, either semi-gloss or a full gloss, so you can easily wipe off all this excess wash that's here. You could do a flat finish, but bear in mind that the flat finish will pick up quite a lot of this and it will be harder to clean it all off, so it'll give you a slightly murky finish, which isn't a bad thing if you're looking for something that's already partially weathered, because it'll give you that natural dirtiness there already to work with. But if you want a clean finish, high contrast, then if the paints you have are flat, they'll probably benefit from getting a very thin gloss coat put on top, just to help you wipe off all this excess. Or start with a smoother paint to begin with, so either a gloss finish or a semi-gloss. Now, as I'm applying this, you're probably seeing how much detail is popping up already. I mean, even if you can't see the superfine detail, you see where I've actually painted, and that's showing up. All these fine rivets that would otherwise be missed if you only did this in a monotone color. Now I'm holding it at a particular angle too, so I'm getting the reflection off the studio light, so I can see where all these details are as well. And you can easily do that with your workplace as well. Just angle it to the light. Just so you don't miss anything. It's quite amazing how much surface detail there is here. Alright, so I don't think I missed anything here. Okay, looking pretty spectacular. Right, let's see if I missed anything here. Alright, all of this, the whole lot of rivet details here. Okay, let's do this all the way up to this point. Okay, so I mean that's a very good contrast there. You can see exactly where I've applied all this wash. Looks a bit messy at the moment, but it's going to look great once we finish up with it. Okay, so let's do a little bit of this side. There's a big blob where a little bit too much went on before, because sometimes the wash can get stuck right in the middle here, so you just have to be careful of that. Right, so there's a refueling probe, the interior of it, so make sure we put plenty of wash in there. Okay, putting a lot of wash on here on the opposite side. Lots of little rivet details. Okay, just trying to get the reflection right so I can see all these little rivets. This is where it really demonstrates the great advantage of having a backbone, because usually fuselage is glued up and you've got the seam line down the center, but when you have that down the center, by the time you sand it smooth, you do lose a lot of this really fine detail across the top here. Okay, so there's a wash across the seam where it joined. Alright, I think that's pretty good. Gives us time, so all this should be dry by now, and we'll touch that up by cleaning it up. And while we're doing that, this should dry in time so that I can move on to this one. Let's place this over here, get it out of the way. Here's our drop tank, we'll apply wash onto that a bit later. Okay, so here's the pilots that I did earlier. I think they are still a bit dark, so I'm going to clean them down a bit more. So here's my thinner. It's just a Tamiya enamel thinner. I've shaken it up so that I've only got a little bit of thinner in the cap there. And I'm just going to take a little from there. And actually, if I use a brush, I only need a little bit. And we can gently brush the whole surface of this, so I can use the whole surface. And then we'll start rubbing back to get rid of all this excess wash. Alright, so there's a co-pilot. You notice that I only put on a little bit of thinner because we don't want to pull the thinner anywhere. If it does, if we do apply too much thinner, all it's going to do is it's going to collect in all these creases and shadow points where a lot of wash is, and it's just going to remove it all. It's going to dilute it, and you'll end up with quite a mess. So by just applying it lightly, you have a lot more control, because it doesn't take very much thinner to reactivate the black wash. Alright, there we go. They're done. I'll quickly go over the seats again as well. Well, the seats don't look too bad. It's a little bit heavy across here. Okay, so let's move on to these parts that I just washed before. These are the canopy components, and these will be glued on once we've completed this part. Okay, so here's the base of the canopy. So it's just gently rubbing off all the excess, picking up all the high points, all the highlights, I guess. This is almost like dry brushing without any paint. It's taking off all the shadow tone from the high points. Oops, this part's to just come off, so I'll re-glue that. Probably do have a touch more wash just in the center here, which I missed. Okay, there we go. That's ready. So you see that cotton wood bud's starting to get a bit furry. It's picking up on some of the higher details and just getting torn up a bit. So at this stage I'll be replacing it. You can get some more tightly wound ones. Tamiya and Mr. Hobby make them. Or you can just use standard ones. It just means you need to replace these often. Okay, so let's just shake this up again. Pick up a bit here. Actually, let's use a brush. Brush is more effective in getting it thin coat all around. Okay, let's start working on these other bits. All right. Now this is the sunshade for the pilot's instrument panel. This is going to have the head-up display on it as well. Okay. Here's our front panel. To center point. Front windshield. Okay, one canopy there. Okay. Actually, let's just do the wheels as well. This won't take long. Just got the little tiny front nose wheels. Okay. All right, so we've done quite a bit of wash, clean up a little bit, concentrated more on the cockpit area because this is where we're going to do a lot of our final assembly. Now, I'm just going to quickly go back to where I may need to put in some of these clear parts. So let's see, where are we? We need to mount up head-up display on here. So we'll just go back to that part. All right, where are we? Okay, so that's just here. All right, so just this point here where we've got head-up display. Let's see. Alright, so we just need J4, which is just over here. I just need to take a little extra care because they're very, very small parts. So just carefully clean it up a little bit on the sides where the nubs were cut. Okay, now I'm going to prepare the glue. I'm just going to pop it on this little top here. Let's see, this quite often gets blocked up. So let's see if I can open this up. Right, I'm just going to use a skewer and just pull a little bit out. Just there. Probably a bit more. Okay. Excuse me. Alright, so I'm just going to wipe off this excess. Just so I've got a nice clean tool to apply. Now let's do a dry fit of this little head-up display. See how's it meant to sit. Alright, so it's going to fit in that little hole. It fits in really cleanly actually. So all we need to do is, I'm just going to pick up that head-up display again, dip it in a touch of glue, and we'll drop it in place. That was easy enough. Now the hole protrudes all the way to the bottom here, so I'll put a little dollop in here as well. Just make sure it's nice and secure. Alright, we'll give that time to dry. Now you should always remember that the clear glue does take some time to dry compared to plastic cement. It's always best to leave it, like a small application like that, half an hour to an hour before you start handling it. So we'll pop it over there, get it out of the way. Now there's more clear parts involved as well. Let's see if I can search back. Actually, we're just going to be concentrating on the canopy here really, and I don't think there's any more clear parts that do go in the canopy. So how about we'll just start mounting up all those components. Alright, so it means that from last time, we're up to step 61. So step 61 is right here. This is attaching the canopy. So this top diagram here is showing the canopy closed, but we're doing the open canopy version. So let's do this one here. Actually, I will be needing this part, which I just glued the head-up display. This is just going to pop in here. Okay, so let's just tack that in there. Okay, so now we've got front canopy, or I should say the windscreen. It's going to fit like that. This is going on the back here, like so. Don't know why, but that seems to be missing something. I think I've forgotten something there. Let's go back. I'm sure that's meant to be fully sealed, so I've left the part off as I've been moving back and forth. Quickly find out what that is. So it's good to double check all your instructions before you finally glue things up. If it looks a little bit strange, it doesn't take much just to check before it becomes permanent. Okay, that's because this is quite an important part, isn't it? So this goes here. Alright, so that sits in there, sits on that. Now we have our center section here. Now it was in a step where this is meant to be. This part of the canopy should be glued before we apply it. So let's see if we can do that easily. Okay, so I'm going to apply some of this clear glue. So let's apply it onto this side. I'm going to apply this quite liberally because it's holding up the whole canopy. And as I put this on, there may be some need to use some tape to hold it all in place while it's drying. But we'll see what it's like once I push it on. See if the water tension itself can hold it in place. Well, the tension of the glue is holding it in place. Just means I've got to be really careful that I don't touch this too much. Yep, like so. Okay, so that's very, very delicate for the moment until it dries. So I'll see if I can put it aside where it's going to glue quite naturally by itself. Sort of pop it there, alright. And now we have this one which is going to mount on here. Alright, so before we do all that, we're going to start gluing this together. So I think I'll glue this on before we attach that backing. Whoops. So again, I'm going to apply, let's see, let's do a test fit first, make sure it all goes together. Well, that's quite snug. All right. Again, I'm applying glue quite liberally, Just make sure it has plenty of strength. Just apply a little bit of glue to the face of these as well, just increase the gluing surface area. Oop. A little bit of excess to come out here. Alright, so that's quite delicate as well, so I'm just going to pop it on this side to dry. Alright, so these parts themselves look quite happy, just like so. Alright, so I'm just going to leave them there for the moment. I'll continue on with just doing a wash across this top of the fuselage. Actually, I've got this little part that fell off before. Let's put it over here so we make sure we don't forget that. Okay, let's start putting it on over here on this wing, on the folded wing. Okay, so just applying all this wash, same way as I did on the other side of the wing. And again, just holding it at a particular angle so I can see all these rivets. I just noticed I've got a nub here which I missed from earlier. Let's do a quick trim. Okay.
Maybe we can lift it up.
Now it looks like I've got a hole across the top of this panel here. I think that's because I was repairing and I actually drilled too far. I've gone all the way through, which isn't a good thing. But it doesn't really matter. I can fill that with a bit of sprue goo. And as I demonstrated last time, if you do make mistakes, there's always a fix. Really like the detail on the hinging on this folded wing. So again, the reason for only having one folded wing was to get an idea of the options available in the kit. So you get an impression of what it's going to look like with the wings folded down and also folded up. Quite clever engineering here too, because this joint here is actually very strong rather than a butt joint that you would see on quite a lot of early kits. Generally it's perfectly fine, but during handling, and one of those things you can't not handle these sometimes, and if things start breaking very easily, it's quite disheartening. Okay, I think I've got everything there. Alright, so we've got a lot of the top there done. Actually, I haven't done this side as yet. So I'm going to try and do as much as I can, because the next one is going to be the last session, I think, where we're going to do the final assembly of everything. So what we have left is the canopies to be glued on. The framework is just drying at the moment. We used the canopy glue. And then we have the refueling probe and also the crew ladder. So it's pretty much just finishing touches. There's still a few little clear parts, so I'll be going throughout the instructions to see where I missed them and go back and put them in. And intentionally left them off so that I could put them in after the wash. Okay, so there's quite a bit of the wash applied across the top. There's still going to be the bottom as well. Okay, Okay, so we've still got a lot to do here, but it's getting really close. All right, that is the end of this session. So thanks again for joining me. So look, see here, we have the Phantom. It's not a lot different from where we started, but it does have a lot of wash on it, which is just bringing out all the finer details. Once we get this cleaned up, it's going to be quite subtle and have a lot more depth than it did when it was just raw plastic. Cockpit is practically done. And then it does look quite a bit different with the windscreen on as well. So once we get all these other components from the cockpit dry, it's going to look pretty amazing, I think. So here we go. So thank you for joining me for this build. I think there's probably only one build left, maybe a second. It's got to do with the cleaning up of the wash. It does take a little bit of time. And then we're going to have a closer look at what it looks like all finished up with some close-ups. So thank you very much. I'll see you next time around.